all your school rugby, all in one place. This is Next Gen 15.
Hello and welcome to episode 4 of season 3 of the Next Gen 15 podcast. I'm Angus Savage, joined as ever by Will Roberts. How are you, Will?
I'm good, thank you, Angus. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. We're just sort of in the midst, as we record, of preparing for this weekend's Seaford Southern Tens, which is it's always one of the good ones, and looking forward to it. I'm sure we'll be talking about it as the podcast goes on. But before we get started, obviously a reminder to please do send in your questions and your thoughts. We're keen to talk about what you guys want to hear about, and you can get in touch with us on @NextGen15. That's @NextGenXV on all platforms, and also the NextGen15 Clubhouse, where we are definitely going to be talking about a little piece of content that came out there yesterday, because there's been some big news. But we're going to keep you on tenterhooks before we get into that, because we've got our bread and butter to get through, haven't we, Will?
Yes, yeah, we do. And arguably the round to look out for so far, I think.
Oh yeah,
in this Academy League.
What an incredible! I mean, we flagged that there were some big games, but I think we kind of in the back of our heads thought big games, but we know how this is going to pan out. Wow, we don't know what we're talking about at all.
Nope.
Absolutely incredible. I mean, we might as well start at the end and Quinn's Bath. You see that coming?
No, not at all. Not at all. And I think the game was, from what I saw, absolutely fascinating one. I did, after that sort of scoreline, have to get in touch with someone who was on the ground, and luckily, good friend of Next Gen and very, very good commentator, Joe Burns was there at the scene, and he gave me some sort of key headlines I'm sure we could break down into. I mean, his first message to me was unreal match. So he said a real treat. 3 yellow cards for Bath, which I think paints a bit of a picture. Joe Burns says that Quins were playing proper Quins DNA, really. Forwards and backs interplay was fluid at times. He then recognises that Sean Sharp is a nice player, which I think arguably is one of the understatements.
What an incredible understatement that is.
Matt Jones as well, classy 10. And Gorlaku with a couple of big moments. Those are his sort of headlines. But I think, yeah, the ill-disciplined costing Bath, from what I've seen, I think all 4 of their tries were rolling mauls, so they clearly came out with a sort of a stated claim on how to play. But look, Quins are just seeming to get better and better and better as this under-18 league comes around.
Yeah, massively. I mean, it changes the whole complexion of the league. I mean, the fixtures we look ahead to now that are going to be big ones. You know, that Saracens Bath game in a couple of weeks' time now becomes absolutely enormous in the shake-up. The one thing I want to think about is, obviously, we've got England under-18 coming up towards the end of this sort of school term, and the under-18 Six Nations and stuff. They're not going to lean too heavily on one-off games, all the rest of it. That's not really what the pathway system is about. But do you think a performance like that, a result like that, perhaps get some of those guys who were, you know, Quins players who were maybe fringe players on that squad, you know, the 50-50 call whether they get in versus someone else, performing in probably your highest pressure game at that level against the side that most think is the best side in the league, certainly did coming in? Do you think that might, just for a couple of those lads who are maybe on the edge, make that little bit of a difference?
Definitely. It has to, because realistically, playing when any sort of age grade, when people are looking at the qualities of an international rugby player, you're looking at someone who can play the best when it counts against the toughest opposition. That's basically the definition of an international rugby player. And it seems like from 1 to 23, Harlequins produced that at the weekend. As I said, look, we mentioned a handful of players there who we know are going to be that spine of that Harlequin side, and most likely the spine of international sides over the next couple of years. But I'd imagine, as you say, there are going to be those slightly more fringe players that are going to be putting their hand up, because yeah, it's a real resilient performance, not only to get the point, the win, but the bonus point as and also deny Bath a losing bonus point by being by there being an 8 point deficit, and that could be monumental when it comes down to the final standings. Usually in this southern bracket, there are only about 1 or 2 points that separate
Yeah.
first to third, first to fourth. That's how tight it can be and has been over previous years. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating. I mean, Angus, a word on Bath, because it's not the performance they would have wanted, but they're sort of out of the frying pan into the fire this weekend against Saracens, in which that now becomes a must-win game for them if they want to keep their hopes of retaining the under-18 league title.
Yeah, I mean, I can't work out whether it's the game they want or the game they really don't want. You know, Saracens obviously getting that brilliant bonus point victory over Exeter. They're top of the table at the moment, unbeaten, and I think probably Bath will be licking their lips at it, because what do you want after a big challenge? You want another big challenge, particularly as a coaching group. They probably want to be. This is a real test, maybe, for some of those guys who are maybe, they're undecided whether they get a contract or not. It's okay. We're in a high pressure situation now. How do you respond in another big game a week after disappointment? It's probably, from a coaching point of view, perfect for the players. I'm sure they probably prefer a nice easy one, but actually, in terms of what we're looking at here, the Academy League is about finding future professional rugby players. So actually, these back to back big tests in the face of disappointment, that's probably exactly what's needed. And they'll learn an awful lot about a good chunk of those players. So I mean, it's gonna be awesome, and I bet Saracens are absolutely licking their lips over it as well.
Absolutely, but something that Bath will have to stamp out of their game is they spent a maximum of 30 minutes with 14 men. We don't know how those yellow cards were sort of panned out across the course of the fixture. But to have three yellow cards in one game, no matter who you are, is going to affect you, and that's going to have to be something that they stamp out, regardless of. Look, you can talk about conditions, opposition referees, whatever that will mean that potentially that's sort of accentuated across the course of 80 minutes, your discipline and records, but they that would have ultimately cost them the game of the weekend.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I suppose it's another thing that, if we look at it from a coaching point of view, they'll want to work on that, but also they'll probably be looking at it and going, well, how did those 14 on the field respond to being 14 down? Again, it's a good sort of stress test, isn't it?
Mm.
And you'd say they've come through it with flying colours. There's one guy from that Saracens team I want to just touch on. 4 tries, Noah Calori, Mill Hill superstar. Obviously, he came to a lot of people's attention over the summer with that wonder try for England under 18 down in South Africa. He had a bit of a tricky run with injury through the school season. We had him live when Mill Hill played Finborough. That was his comeback game. Came off the bench, had a couple of nice touches and a score in the corner, but was still sort of getting his game back a little bit. But wow, 4 tries, looking sharp.
Yeah, I think from what we saw of the try-lights, it was the Mill Hill combination of Ryan Jones and Noah Calori. Basically, Ryan Jones would just kick a ball in the vicinity of Noah Calori, and somehow he hit the spring on him. He could basically, he was jumping over Exeter players, catching the ball and running in and scoring. And yeah, look, he looks a real special character, not necessarily like a stereotypical Saracens winger. Because what we normally see from our Saracens wingers, that their defense and their toughness, and maybe they're sort of just that agile finisher that can sort of finish well worked moves. Whereas Calori is one of these that can make something out of nothing. So you'd imagine if he were to sign with Saracens, he's going to add something completely different to their arsenal. And but for the moment, at under 18s level, yeah, he's making things look quite easy against it. As we said, we thought that it might be tricky for Exeter to travel on the day. I mean, the kickoff was pushed back, so clearly they had troubles getting there in the first place. And yeah, look, it's that must be a bit of a disheartening moment, probably knowing that their season is over, especially with this result. So to then having to kind of pick themselves back up, that they've still got 2 tough games to try and make themselves an account for, 2 arguably of the games that they're sort of will be keen to win. So it's tricky.
Yeah, it's a tough one for Exeter, isn't it? I mean, we knew it was going to be tough. The early start, the long away trip, and you're facing Saracens, who I suppose at the moment we'd probably say the form side in the competition, given the way things have gone. It was a tricky one for them. Tricky first outing for Sale Sharks as well. Um, didn't get underway obviously in the first week because the snow came in, and so their game against Northampton Saints of Spain, that's actually taking place this weekend, I'm told. So that's good news. They managed to find a slot to get that one played. But obviously, Sale then had the bye week, and then they went up to play Yorkshire, who were looking for a first victory and found a way to get there. Terrific from Yorkshire, but a tough opener for Sale, who just a bit of, I suppose, lacking a bit of game time.
Yeah, that it's this fixture list has been really, really cruel to Sale. We spoke about it in previous pods, and I think Yorkshire were kind of able to capitalize on it. Looks a high scoring game. You're getting sort of close to 70, 80 points aggregate across sort of both teams. You understand that potentially there's issues in sharpness, and that usually comes in your defense before it sort of exposes itself in your attack. So look, there are clearly two sides that were keen to score tries, and yeah, Sale will be frustrated because I think they play that first game against Southampton. If they were to sort of get some sort of shock victory, or at least sort of stake a claim for this northern bracket, then it could have been a very, very different season for them. But a loss to Yorkshire probably means that in what is such a truncated northern bracket, and you only have sort of a couple opportunities really to make a push for the final, then it's crazy to think that Sale potentially are sort of one and done.
Well, yeah, particularly when you've got Saints and Leicester playing each other in round four. That'll be their, or round three for both of those. But you know what I mean. That one of them, unless there's a draw, which is unlikely, although we will come on to that. One of them is going to win and is going to be 3 from 3. And given how truncated that North Pool is, it's going to be really difficult for anyone to hunt them down at that point, because it's just so close. I mean, probably the side that feels they might have the opportunity now to hunt them down is actually Yorkshire.
Yeah.
They're, as a result of having stayed in touch in one of their defeats, getting the bonus points in the bag, they're sitting there on 6 points after 3 games, which is not too bad. And a word on Yorkshire getting that victory. Yeah, I've seen a couple of highlights. They were really moving the ball around quite nicely, and almost hitting the 50-point mark. That's a real feather in the cap for them.
It is absolutely, and we're always going to praise Yorkshire because they're it's such a difficult situation for coaches, players, and staff to be in comparison to all these other clubs, because the mindset is completely different. You're not playing for a shirt in the senior team. You're playing for you show reel basically to then put out to various other Premiership clubs to see if they want to pick you up. Yes, they've played the most amount of games in that northern bracket, so there is a bit of an asterisk next to that 6, because obviously Newcastle and Sale will want to catch them up. But they, as you say, look, we could imagine that either one of Northampton and Leicester will win that game, and then that could put Yorkshire have played them both, so they don't have to worry about Leicester and Northampton anymore.
Yeah.
They can go to Newcastle, which is their final game. They were to get 5 points out of that, sitting on 11 points. That's not the worst thing in the world. A second place finish in the northern bracket for Yorkshire would be really impressive, and that could certainly be doable.
Be absolutely huge for them. It'd be massive. Looking at Saints, actually, just sort of rounding off that northern section, obviously a brilliant performance away at Newcastle Falcons, 40-12 victory, which again, I mean, it's useful to look at other results to get a context of how good a performance is. Newcastle were really pretty close against Leicester Tigers the round previous, and we've spoken previously about how good a job Newcastle have been doing in the academy of bringing players through, how heavily populated those under-18s and under-20 squads have been with Newcastle players. Saints going up there, big away trip, 40-12 victory. Saints are looking very tidy.
Yeah, they are, and they almost. I don't want to say rotated because they didn't, but they changed a few sort of names around in that team sheet, which is quite uncommon in the under 18 league because it's so short. You usually have this is our starting 15 who will play pretty much the whole tournament, whereas Saints I think made about a half dozen changes across their 23, which is brilliant because it's giving other players a chance and other players an opportunity, and they still were able to produce the same sort of performance. I mean, we're getting to the sort of point in which we're starting to look at who's going to top each group, and with this Saints have now got a very interesting few weeks where they've got to a point to prove against Sale, and then go to Leicester. You'd imagine they get any points out of both of those games. Could surely it's another visit to the final for Northampton, which mentally will absolutely mess with them.
Well, I think that's the thing, isn't it? That Sale Sharks game now becomes absolutely massive because if they get the victory there, if they get a bonus point victory there, they're pretty much in the final
Yeah.
because they're going to be there because they're already a point clear of Leicester. Yeah, they're going to have to. Leicester are going to have to be absolutely perfect to do anything about it. But I suspect Sale are going to be pretty determined come the weekend after that tricky opener, and we'll have a lot more cohesion as well. I mean, one thing that was really noticeable about Sale Sharks' team sheet, I thought, was that we're used to it being largely a sort of Kirkham Grammar School dominated team with a smattering of Sedbergh in there and a couple of other players from other places. This year, their team is very, very diverse in terms of where it's drawn from. You've got St Ambrose College represented, St Anselm's College. I think there was a King's Macclesfield player in there. There's a Wirral Grammar School player in there. There's an Ellesmere College player in there. I think there was a Myerscough winger on as well. So there's a real diversity of schools there that they're drawing in. And obviously, when everyone else has already had 2 games to get used to each other, and Sale are bringing in guys from here, there, and everywhere, correctly because those are the right guys for the position. But they've not had that chance to earn that cohesion in a match day scenario that maybe everyone else has had the last 2 weeks to do. But they will have had that a little bit last week, so there'll be a different proposition against Saints, I would have thought. Final game, well, actually, it was the very first game of the weekend, but final one in our roundup. We weren't sure. I think one of us went for Bristol for the victory, and one of us went for Gloucester.
So are we both right? Is
Well,
that how it works?
split the difference, yeah.
Yeah.
Split the difference, it's all good. 33 all draw. Probably both sides come away reasonably satisfied, I guess.
Yeah, I think they will from a performance standpoint. It arguably sort of kills both of their sort of seasons because you'd imagine like Gloucester in particular, if Gloucester were to have got, let's say, a bonus point win, then that puts them up to 9 points, and that puts them 1 point behind Bath. So that would have been very interesting. That's how crazy this sort of southern bracket is that you've got a team that you literally lose one game and then you're practically out of it.
Yeah,
Because everyone's
it's
just
so
beating
tough,
everyone.
isn't it? So tough.
Um,
Although I tell you what, it sort of brought home to me that scoring a lot of tries in a draw, you get a decent points haul.
yeah,
You get your bonus point with your draw. You get 3 points. You're only 1 point off what you'd get with a three try
yeah.
victory. So it's never the worst outcome. But as you say, this section is just so tight that there's just nothing you can do if you're not getting the victories because there's always going to be a side or two that's building momentum somewhere. But I think positive outlook for both sides. I mean, both would have obviously wanted that first victory, but scoring a hatful of points, playing in a thrilling game, getting a first sort of positive outcome of the season, they'll be happy. Gloucester are specialists in tight games, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's 3 out of 3 that have been within a hair's breadth. They're doing pretty. They're certainly making things competitive, aren't they?
It's absolutely a like what could have been season for Gloucester, because I mean, literally a coin flip another way, and they're 3 from 3. So it is just kind of the way that the wind blows for the Cherry and Whites. But you've got to commend their sort of their resilience every week to sort of get back up and go again, get back up and go again. And look, Bristol, that we see a lot of the Bristol scores and their social media team do so well to put them out because they're just so good. And the style of rugby that they're playing is brilliant. And that kind of, we get so caught up in the wins and losses, but we know inside they don't at all. They're worried about how they're playing. Is it the right style for their senior team and how they want to produce sort of the right players? And yeah, are they getting the right solo performers that they can then move on into the right sort of parts in their senior team? And despite not getting a win so far this season, Pat Lam and Bristol probably going yes, 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 because there are players that are standing out in what is not the strongest of Bristol under 18s teams that we've seen in the last couple of years, and that's not a diss on this year. It's just because they've had such strong years over the last couple of years. And look, that they'll be really, really pleased internally with the way that they've been able to play, the players that have stepped up and produced some good work, and they'll set themselves up quite well. Not necessarily for this under-18s league, but for who they're able to sign and pick up and push into their senior academy.
Yeah, actually, something just popped into my head with Bristol. I really must ask them about this because they keep playing Evan Morris from Millfield at fullback and Ollie Harris from Clifton on the wing, and they play the other way around for their schools. Now, admittedly, Millfield have Ben Morrow at fullback, so who's been starting for Saracens. Maybe there's a little something there, but I keep looking at it and going, I wonder. There's obviously a rationale there, and I must ask someone about that because it keeps interesting me every time I see it. But actually, on what you were saying about Bristol, the style of rugby they're playing. I mean, we've mentioned this before about how for certain teams, the way they use this league is what I would see as being really positive, which is we've got how we want to play at first team level, and we're using this league to ingrain that in our players. And Bristol definitely doing it massively, massively well, and it's a real feather in the cap, I suppose. I mean, we could get really deep into the ins and outs of Premiership contracts, but it's a real feather in the cap for the fact that they've got Pat Lam there on a very long contract as head coach, which, for the rights and wrongs of that, what it does do is create a sense of stability, which means that you can say to your academy, go out and play like this, because in 4 years' time, when these guys are playing senior rugby for us, they're going to be well practiced at it, and we can just drop these guys straight into the first team, and we know that they know how to play our rugby, not just Premiership rugby. So I think that's a massive positive for them, and most clubs are doing that. But the stability that they have there at Bristol, we see it at Saracens as well with the stability they've got. That coaching group's been there for God, how long? 20 years. Something enormous. That allows them to do these things. There is only the one game to cast a prediction over this weekend. I'll let you go first. Will Saints Sale? What are we thinking?
Yeah, I do think that Saints are going to continue their momentum and sort of get a win here. As I said, it's absolutely it's just as much as it's what could have been for Gloucester, it's certainly what could have been for Sale. Because I think this game first up would have thrown up a lot more question marks, but this Northampton side are now really well drilled, and they look as though they're very comfortable in putting teams to the sword. And that's what they've done in their first couple games. I do think that's what they'll do here, but I'm interested to see if you're gonna back the underdogs here, Angus, because we've been doing more and more split decisions as this podcast goes on.
Well, if we split the decisions, one of us is always right, which always helps, unless they draw, of course. But I mean, it's hard to look past Saints. Less to do with Sale last week and more to do with the fact that Saints have started like a train. They've, as you mentioned, they've actually rotated through due to injuries and all the rest of it. I think they had 5 changes to the starting team last week. Yeah, that's a lot of rotation in this league. You don't tend to see that much, and they've still come away with a really strong performance. It's hard to look past them, but I do know Sale are going to be unbelievably determined. Will Bennett, the Sedbergh skipper at open side, is going to be relishing the opportunity to go up against his Sedbergh vice captain Archie Appleby, who's captaining Saints. So I think there's going to be a bit of spice in there. I know they're good mates off the field, but I suspect they will be looking to target each other on the field. So there'll be plenty there, but yeah, Saints go in as favourites. I think it'd be hard to look past them.
Mm-hmm, indeed, and yeah, let's hope that Sedbergh derby that we it's kept nice and clean, and is a good performance, because I think the last thing we want is that they sort of go out and sort of, you'd imagine now that we've hyped it up, one of them will get injured or put out, and then we have that's just our luck, it seems, when we're trying to hype up sort of combinations and fixtures and whatnot.
Fingers crossed, not fingers crossed. We want to see plenty of those two, because they're absolute superstars. We're going to see a lot of superstars this weekend at the Seaford Southern Tens. The great beauty of the Seaford Tens being this weekend is that we've got the rest week in the Academy League, bar that Saints Sale game. So hopefully, fingers crossed, a lot of players are available. And I tell you what, it's all going to be live here on Next Gen 15. We've got Oval 1 and Oval 2 pitches, both live. Kick-off 10 a.m. We're going to be live from about 9:45 with a bit of build-up. There's a good chance in the afternoon as well for a bit of analysis and chat as well. So if you've got any thoughts on the morning's activities, then do get in touch with us, because we'd love to talk about what you guys want us to talk about, rather than whatever nonsense I come up with when I've got a microphone in my hand. But it's going to be absolutely fantastic. 16 teams, 10-a-side rugby. It's the start of the short form season, isn't it?
It is. It's the curtain raiser, and it's the one that sort of kind of always throws up some really interesting clashes of styles, because you'll have some teams that are still trying to play 15s with 10 people, and you'll some that are trying to play 7s with 10, and you sort of the styles and clashes. You sometimes see teams almost changing game to game, and they'll put, like, we're going to put our heavy boys into this game and sort of try and beat them up front, and sort of still play that sort of 15 style. And this one, yeah, we're gonna bring on our back three and play our 15 at 10, and just sort of try and run our way around. And it's brilliant, because it kind of creates a bit of an unpredictability around the tournament, and especially this year. Look, you've got 3 teams that are new to the draw, that all kind of come with their own sort of accolades and reasons to potentially put them towards the top. Seaford obviously usually go in as sort of either a dark horse and or a favourite, because it's their home tournament, and in the last few years they've definitely gone in as favourites, because they've played really, really well in this competition. Yeah. Other than that, I'd say it's a fairly even keel. I love that. I think Gordon's going to be really, really exciting, coming off the back of such a hot ace campaign. And yeah, there's going to be so many different strings for us to pull on in terms of stories across this campaign.
Yeah, it's going to be brilliant. I mean, it really does feel like the proper curtain raiser, and I know that's kind of the way they want to pitch it. This is sort of the start of the sort of short form season. We begin with 10s, we ease into 7s after this, we peak at Rosslyn Park, and then we're back into 10s at Sedbergh to close the terms rugby off. It's always a great curtain raiser. And as you say, I mean, Seaford always in the mix. Home side, they are itching, absolutely itching, I'm sure, to get across the line in this one. They've come so close. Semi-finals last year, they were inches away from making it. But the side that really jumps out to me this year is RGS High Wycombe.
Yeah.
They were in the final last year. They've been in back-to-back St Joseph's Festival finals. They're in the Continental Tire Schools Cup semi-finals. I feel like if ever a team deserved a piece of major silverware, it's RGS High Wycombe. They've come so close. I mean, St Joseph's Festival, I mean, they were brilliant, but they just came up against St Michael's, who were unplayable.
Yeah.
They must just be going, how is it that this year of all years is the year that the brilliant Irish side comes over, not been one for 20 years, and now we get faced with one of them. So I think it's going to be, I if I was to sort of jump out of my neutral seat and back a horse, you'd go just for their own sanity, you'd be backing RGS High Wycombe.
Yeah, absolutely. They've so close yet so far as they have been throughout the whole of throughout the whole of the last couple of years of schoolboy rugby. And they're in such an interesting group. That group four, I think that Felsted know this competition really, really well. I think they did well in the bowl. Was it the bowl that they won last year?
Yeah, won the bowl last year, and they've they was it? I think they won the continental tie. Was it last year or the year before? I think it was last year. They won the continental ties,
Yeah.
schools vars. So that they know knockout rugby. They know competitive rugby. They're a good side. Look at some of the players that come through their ranks. Max Malin's chief among them. Rory Hutchinson as well. This is a place that produces top players. So they're going to be a tough old side to crack as well.
Like Epsom, like they obviously plate finalists. I think this group four is so hard to call. And then you have like Kes Bath, who are basically going to come in and go, let's give it a go, because
Yeah.
they're sort of yet to sort of stake their claim in Seaford, but they've arguably had their best season at
Yeah,
15th level so far this year.
and Kes, I'd even put them in the dark horse bracket. Kes,
Yeah,
they've had an amazing 15-a-side season. Only lost the one game. They've been going to the Seaford Tens for years and years and years, so they know tennis-side rugby. Their coaching staff know the drill. They know what it looks like. They're used to competitive rugby in this sort of format as well. I think underestimate them at your peril if you're in that group. They could go really far. I mean, it is brutal. I mean, how do you pick a side to top that group? I don't know. Could be a case of is your game scheduled for the sort of later morning or the early morning, because that can sometimes make all the difference. Particularly if you're a Kes Bath, who are one of the furthest travelling sides. They're probably hoping that they get off the bus feeling nice and fresh, I suspect.
well, on I've just looked at the schedule on Oval One at 12:05. The last game of the group for RGS High Wycombe is against Kesbath, and I think that one, depending
Yeah.
on how it sort of shapes up throughout the rest of the morning, that this could be a sort of as last games in pools usually are. They're either completely dead and sort of the groups being won or lost, and we can just enjoy the rugby, or as I think will happen in this group, they're going to be tense, and that game. Look, it's on Oval One, so live on Next Gen, 12:05, RGS High Wycombe, Kesbath. If that's not good sort of Sunday lunchtime viewing, then I don't know what is.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's a serious game to end the pool on.
Yeah,
It could be an absolute cracker. Another new side, St Joseph's College.
yeah.
Once again, a team that knows tournament rugby. They've been hosting that festival of theirs since 1986, I think it began. They know their way around a tournament, that's for sure. Obviously, might be missing a couple of guys to Saints, but probably not too many. But they'll be looking at this and going, we want to come in and make a big impact. And obviously a good relationship between them and Seaford. Seaford are regulars at the St Joseph's Festival, so I think they'll want to make their mark at their friends and rivals tournament. But again, another tricky group. You've got obviously Gordon's there that you've mentioned, Will. You've got Hurstpierpoint College, who local side have had some really good teams in recent years, and then Dulwich College, who
Yeah.
I want to sort of focus on a little bit, because last year they got all the way to the final, to the semi-finals, I think it was actually, and they had an amazing sort of short form season after a really difficult 15-a-side season. But they came through. I remember at the Ipswich Floodlit Sevens at Grasshoppers, they stung the hosts first game of the night. Yeah, brilliant sort of 7-a-side, 10-a-side team. This year, their 15-a-side has been a little bit better. They finished off on a high. So they must be looking at this and going, well, if we could make the jump so well last year from 15s to 10s to 7s, after a better 15-a-side season, what could we do? They must be thinking we can we can do anything. We could be invincible.
Mm. Yeah, I think they're again. I'm not going to throw around dark horses anymore because I think it's such a everyone's a dark
Everyone's a
horse.
horse.
Everyone's some sort of horse in some sort of shade. Let's keep it at that. But yeah, look, I think they're going to again want to go a couple steps further than their last sort of trials out in Seaford, and I think that group um, could be one that favours Dulwich purely because of just how well they did last year. And I think what's their first game is oh, I've lost it now. Their first game is against Gordon's, which, as I say, I think that Gordon side could go definitely one of two ways because they could keep that momentum up from that ace season. They've obviously had a lot of players involved in a high flying Harlequin side. Again, there's always an asterisk of how many of them are going to be available and utilised. You'd imagine Harlequins in the position they're in with the possibility to potentially win the Southern bracket. Would they be wanting to go? Yes, of course you can have all our players, and yes, of course you can go and play some Seaford Tens. You'd imagine they'll want to. It'll be interesting conversations between school and club over the course of across Seaford Tens this weekend. But Dulwich could certainly top that group and then go into quite a good run towards the final.
Certainly could. It'll be I think it's quite a tasty group that looks pretty even, judging by what's sort of likely to be available for people.
Yeah.
Group two has obviously got the reigning champions Ipswich in. I'll be interested in Ipswich. Weirdly they've not been talked about that much this year. Obviously since Jacob Ford left, things have been a little quieter. But actually, the season they had was way better than the noise suggested, or the lack of noise suggested. They actually had a very good season. Reigning champions, they reached the final the year before as well. They probably are going to be missing a couple of their top players because Saints have got that game, which might impact them. But you'd imagine they'll be up there again, not least because they just know this format so well now. There's a team actually in this group that's to be decided. There was a late dropout. They're just getting someone else in, so we don't know the full extent of this group just yet. But Marlborough College and Solihull also joining the fray. Marlborough College, who have had some really exciting teams down the years and have competed well here, and Solihull, who've been playing bags of rugby this term, so they're going to arrive with plenty of rugby under the belts, that's for sure. But you'd think Ipswich would be really targeting trying to go back to back as Trinity did a couple of years back.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's again going to be a case of how much they're sort of blighted by their own success in the how many sort of Northampton Saints players are picked up for this weekend. You'd imagine that. I think there's been some injuries as well that has been accrued over the Academy League that could sort of bite them, and they're in a group that, for their standards as reigning champions, they'll want to top. But they're also in a group where they only know 2/3 of their opposition. Which, yeah, we know at schoolboy level there's not much analysis going on. They're focusing on themselves. They're wanting to sort of do that. But as we said with tens, because it's people take it in such different directions and such a varied kind of format of the sport, which is what makes it so brilliant. You kind of want to know if you're going to come up against a side that are known at their 15s for their catch and drive and known for sort of run, and then you're like, oh, okay, they're most likely going to bring their type 5 and try and beat you up.
They're going to play 15s rather than 7s, yeah.
Exactly. You kind of want to know which way round they're going to be. And Ipswich won't have that luxury until sort of a couple of days before the tournament, you'd imagine. So I think those are going to be the two hiccups for them. But do you think they can potentially go back to back?
Yeah, I mean, I think if they top the group, suddenly every avenue becomes open. I don't think, for me, they're probably not the favourites, but I think they probably are the favourites to top their group. And as I say, once you're in that knockout stage, it's anyone's game.
Yeah.
Suddenly it's about pressure. It's about, with only 9 minutes each way as well. Sometimes it's just about a little bit of luck of the draw of have you got the ball?
Yeah.
Time can just run out on you before you really get a chance to show your hand in some of these knockout games. So, it'll come down to really fine margins. Finally, then Group One, obviously the host Seaford College, Camford, 2022 and 2023 champions Trinity, and the final new entrant Mount St Mary's College from Derbyshire, who were up at the Merchiston Castle Festival earlier back in October. They've had a pretty strong season. They're the furthest travelling side, so they're going to want to make their mark. But again, another group that's really competitive. But as we mentioned at the top of this sort of segment, Seaford are going to be so determined, aren't they?
Yeah, I'd really like to hear your thoughts on this one, Angus, because if I'm honest, I think this is arguably one of the toughest to call because you've got like Trinity, Seaford seasoned in terms of this competition. Canford obviously reached the Vars final last year. It's a challenging group, and Mount St Mary's again just going to come in as this team that haven't played in this competition before and are just going to try and throw absolutely everything at it. So look, it's a difficult group, so I'm going to leave it to you to try and figure that one out. I'll hospital pass that
Yeah,
over to you.
well, it's a tough one, as you say. I mean, I think Mount St Mary's a really good side, and they could be well suited to tens. Yeah, they're probably not the deepest, but they've got some good quality. So I think that they'll like the idea of tens. Trinity, not at the heights they were in 2022, 2023, but having had that experience of winning those two tournaments, they're going to be probably looking at this and going, well, we know what we're doing here. We've got great history here. They'll fancy it. Camford are a good side. Obviously, sort of produced some great players, but they've got some great coaching there as well. They'll be thinking, well, actually, the way this is, if we can nick a result here and nick a result there, we might be in with a chance. Particularly when you consider that Seaford as hosts and probably the favourites for me in this group. There's a bit of pressure on them because it's their home tournament. They're so determined to do well, or they will be so determined to do well, that there is that added pressure that probably no one else quite has. So it does leave things pretty open. I mean, for me, Seaford are the side to watch here, and I'm desperately hoping that they've got access to all their best players. I'm sure more so than anyone else they would have been putting the pressure on and will be looked upon most favourably from that point of view because it's their tournament. But I do hope they've got access, not least because I want to see Sharp playing.
Yeah.
Selfishly, I just want to see good players playing rugby. So I think it's going to be a belter of a group. So
I mean,
just
the last sort of spanner to throw in the works is the small matter of this Storm Owen that's apparently heading over.
don't remind me. I don't have enough layers.
Exactly, pack your brolly. But look, as we know, with these sort of competitions, I think St Joe's kind of epitomised it the best this year because St Joe's, I think we had about 4 storms in one, and then it ended up being sunny. It was such a weird couple of days of weather.
We had all
Um,
4 seasons in one day. It was unbelievable.
we did, and you can imagine it may potentially repeat itself down in Seaford this weekend, and we know that that's a complete leveler. You've got 9 minutes to prove yourself, and if the ball's a bar of soap, and you sort of it's hailing or it's awful conditions, then you can imagine that you sort of look at a player like Sean Sharp and potentially his abilities aren't best utilized, and you start looking at your sort of catch and drive, which is absolutely mental to think about for tens, but could be utilized because that's how torrid it potentially could be. We don't know the sort of legitimacy of this. Storm, I think, used to be such a big thing in Britain, but now we get one every other week now.
Yeah, with
So
a drop of a hat, you get a storm these days, don't you? We're well used to them. The players will be fine. those of us with a microphone in our hand, perhaps less so.
Yeah, potentially not.
Let's try and find some shelter if possible. Hopefully, the next Gen 15 gazebo is up and well
Held
secured.
down firm. Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, it might end up in Brighton. Who knows?
We've bought some industrial sized tent pegs to try and keep it down. Fingers crossed. We lost one at Rosslyn Park a couple of years back in yet another storm. It blew halfway across southwest London, I
I
believe.
think I remember that rolling down the hills of Rosslyn Park. It was certainly a
I got
scene.
a call from the tournament director at 6 o'clock in the morning, telling me the what had happened to our tent. Nothing's happened to our tent. What are you talking about? He went, well, I've just seen it on the A3. Okay. Sorry
Oh
about
God.
that.
Yeah, that is a bit of a classic moment.
Not ideal. Not ideal at all. Right, just to sort of round off then the Seaford Tens. I'm going to put you on the line again. Who do you fancy?
Eesh. I think again, I don't know if this is like viable in terms of I'm talking like semi-final draws and whatnot, and however it kind of works. Um, I think I'd love to see an RGS High Wycombe Seaford final because I
Oh,
think
yeah.
the storylines there are so exciting, and I think there'd be heroes in every other postcode, but villains in this scenario. And I think that's where RGS High Wycombe might strike and potentially sort of in quite Tottenham fashion after playing so well for however long, finally pick up a trophy, get that monkey off that back, and kick on in the continental ties. So. Yeah, I'm going to say RGS High Wycombe with Seaford coming up just short, which is absolutely brutal. But yeah, so is Rugby. So yeah, I'll hand over to you because I think you can potentially be a bit more of a crowd pleaser.
I like that. I mean, it is possible. It's Group 1 versus 3 in the semi-finals and Group 2 versus 4. So
Oh,
they
brilliant.
they absolutely can meet in the final. Who do I mean, I've mentioned RGS High Wycombe. I've got this nagging doubt in the back of my mind that they're going to end up as nearly men again, and I'm just gonna be so gutted for them. I really do hope that RGS get this one because I just think if there is no school in the country that deserves a trophy more than them at the moment. But getting through that group's going to be tough. I like Kesbath, I like Epsom, I like Felsted. But yeah, why not? I'll be a home favourite. Seaford for the title. Go on.
Nice.
Well, also, it always pays to back the people that have asked you to come in and live stream them. So go on, Seaford. On you
Yeah.
go.
Get us back next year.
I'm nothing.
Uh,
I'm nothing if not a company man.
yeah. Yeah, good. Maybe when my private car doesn't make its way all the way to Seaford, then I'll know why. Okay, I'm not going in a private car. Um, but yeah, look, I think either way, it's going to be an exciting tournament. As I say, I hope the weather doesn't spoil it. I hope that we can get some free flowing rugby. I hope it can be the curtain raiser that deserves to be. And I think we've only mentioned two sides there, but there's about four or five that
Oh,
could
I
win this,
mean,
which is
honestly,
always the
it's
case with Seaford, which is why it's so good.
well, it's wide open, isn't it? And I think the thing with it being the first sort of short form tournament of the year, we have no idea
No,
really who's where in terms of preparation, how much sort of they've focused on this, how much time they've even had in training, given that there's other sports going on this term and there's Academy League and all the rest of it. We arrive unknown, and that's it's much like the sort of first set of games in September. You never know what's coming, and we learn a lot from it, and that really is the point of this one. Right, moving on to what I guess is the headline topic this week, and I'm excited about this because we never get to talk about international rugby because it's not what we do. But
no, we
finally,
sort of leave them once they get to there. We sort of go right. That's you done. On to the next, and we start all over again.
Steve Borthwick, my man, he's
Who's
given
he?
us something to talk about. He's decided, he's seen the light and realised that youth is the way forward. And he's called Henry Pollock up into the squad. I mean, first of all, commiserations to Alex Dombrand, whose injury has opened the door to Henry Pollock. But But wow, I mean, he's been the talk of the town, but he's in.
He is, he is, and deservedly so. He should have. We all believe, especially as people that have obviously watched Henry since he was a lot younger than most. We believe that he should have been in it to begin with. And you never want someone to join a squad off someone else's misfortune. But that's the way it's gone for him. And we know the type of character he is. He will take this with both hands and run, well, probably with one hand, knowing Henry, and run with it. Um, yeah, it's gonna be really. So I think he's genuinely one of these players that look, there's in England senior squads, there's usually two or three that we get really, really excited about because they're selected in a squad. They hold tackle bags for 6 weeks, then come home. I don't think Henry Pollock is going to be one of those characters. I think he'll at least sort of make an appearance in some shape or form, whether it be against Wales or Italy, or who knows. There could be a couple of injuries and he's thrown in at France. That could be some. I wouldn't put it past Borthwick because he's just that kind of big game player, and yeah, he deserves to call up absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this when it came out, and I was going, well, he's probably nowhere near the starting 15 today,
No,
but he's the sort of guy that in training is likely to make himself such a nuisance and
yeah,
have such an impact that eventually you get the coaches all looking at each other and going,
why aren't we?
we've got to get this guy in the team somehow.
Yeah,
He's that kind of guy. Right now you look at those back row options. You've got probably, I suspect, a starting back row of Chesham, Ben Earl, and Tom Curry, but you've also got Cunningham South and Tom Willis and Ben Curry knocking around. So probably the selection debate it's probably going to be Chesham and Ben Earl starting, and is Willis starting at 8 or is Earl at 8 with Curry at 7? But so you're probably looking at that as being the starting point of the Six
yeah,
Nations. But you then start looking at it and going, well, actually, Pollock's a very nice bench player. He definitely makes an impact.
yeah.
You then start looking at Ben Earl and going, well, if Ben Earl goes down, Henry Pollock's surely the next cab off the rank because he's like Ben Earl.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
he
abrasive
plays with
sort of
pace. He plays with
rubbable.
power.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Borthwick, as we've seen, has loved a 6-2 split. And I think for that 21 shirt, as it were, if you were to have a 6-1 split, Pollock fits in that really nicely. Because he's just kind of that roll of the dice. The one thing that does go against him is how much Borthwick loves line-out jumpers, and that you've kind of then therefore got a second rower in Ollie Tressam that will most likely play 6, so that kind of cancels out that another position in
Yeah,
in that back row. But Alex Coles has gone down, so kind of Arthur Clarke is kind of coming out of almost out of nowhere. I mean, it's hard for a 6'9" bloke to come out of nowhere, but he has, and has made his way into his England squad. But he's kind of a player in which I can't imagine will get much game time. So you'd think that maybe that's where Pollock fits in, is that they're going to have someone available to slot in if like a Martin or an Itoje goes down injured. Look, I don't think a
yeah,
Sequay is going to be available. So you've got Martin, Itoje, Chesham, really,
yeah,
as your three, with Coles and Ezekwe unavailable. So if let's say Martin has a slight knock or whatever, then you're putting Chesham in, then there's suddenly that spot at 6 or 7 or 8. And then if added onto that they've gone for a 6-2 split, then like it all aligns for Pollock to make his way into that team somehow. And look, Angus, I'd love to talk to you about this rise, because it's again so rare, something that we almost kind of fantasize about with a lot of players. We're like, he'll be
yeah.
playing for England in 2 3 years, but the reality of it is they very rarely are. The last person that kind of did this was Marcus Smith, and we saw how that sort of went on. But to go from playing for your school and 24 months later playing for your country is so rare. How has Henry Pollock done it?
It's absolutely incredible. I mean, I go back to when Stowe won the Vase at the Howden Ross and Park National School Sevens. I think it was 2022, and he was in his lower sixth year. And watching him there, he was just frightening for them, absolutely frightening, and was the same character then that he is today. He was full of beans. You know, I was pitch side with a microphone, and he wanted to come and have a chat, and it wasn't arrogance, it wasn't anything like that. He was just so full of enthusiasm for the game, the tournament, what his team had done. It was amazing, and that was the first point where I went, "Hello, this guy's got something about him." And then a year later, saw him in the Schools Cup against Oakham. I think Oakham actually won the game, but Pollock was
it was really tight there, wasn't it? I remember that. Yeah,
he was absolutely brilliant. I think he scored a try from about 50 metres out, which is a bit of a speciality of his, if we're honest. Finds a bit of space, and turns out he's got the pace of a back three player. And again, you go, okay, this kid's special. And then obviously the rise that you know has been wider seen, where he was captain of the England under-18s. That famous interview where he perhaps didn't realise that the microphones were all live, and then obviously performing for England under-20s, performing for Northampton Saints. And I think the thing that people forget is it's the obvious factor, which is he's a forward, and it is so rare for a forward to come straight out of school and start getting game time for a Premiership team. That's the really unbelievable bit, because he's playing in the most physical part of the field, and he's competing absolutely as if it's second nature to him. And he's competing in the areas where probably instinctively you went, that might be where he'll find it hard.
Yeah.
You know, actually, the bit that everyone's singing his praises about is not the stuff that we've seen through those sort of those graduation years, where it's those long range tries, that pace. It's his abrasiveness in contact. It's his ability to throw off defenders and get across the line from close range. All the things that you probably don't necessarily, or didn't as he was growing up, associate with him. But it's a mentality, really, because he's not the biggest, the most powerful guy. But he's so determined that he's shrugging off 18, 19 stone brutes. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and I think that we're in really fortunate positions in the sort of lines of work that we do, that we get to not only sort of cover and commentate on these sort of players, but be around them, meet them, whatever, and get to know the people behind the players. And I don't know about you, but I think for me, you kind of touched upon it with how he sort of reacted with that Roston Park win. Was he is one of the most enthusiastic rugby people I know. He loves rugby so much, and it comes out in sort of it comes out as this obnoxious sort of character and arrogance when he's cheering and chanting, and sort of it looks like quite banal, I'd like to say. He was sort of usually the master of it, but I think like 80-90% of it that comes out of Henry is genuine. He's so happy. He's so happy to be on that pitch. He's so happy to be cheering on these boys. And ironically, away from the sort of 80 minutes, he's genuinely one of the more humble and sort of respectful people and players that I've come across. And that combination of being able to be so sort of like that off the pitch, and then so excited on but that enthusiasm has to be a key. If we have young players listening, which I'm sure we do, loving the game as much as Henry does is such a factor for not only his rise, but his meteoric rise.
Yeah. If you love it, it makes practice better. It makes training easier. All of these things become easier because you love it. You want to do more. It's the same as anything. If you love it, you're going to throw yourself into it. And boy, has he done it. I'm so gutted, though. I always had this little belief in me as a Scotland fan that what often happens in England might happen with him, because there's such an abundance of talent in that back row. You know, you've got Earl, you've got two Currys, you've got Underhill, you've got Willis, you've got the other Willis, you've got Cunningham South, Chesham, Dombrandt. I thought maybe, just maybe, there's going to be a logjam and he's never going to get his opportunity and he's going to get frustrated and Gregor Townsend's going to call him. and he's going to play for Scotland. And my hopes and dreams have been crushed. So, as much as I'm pleased for Henry Pollock, and I pat Steve Borthwick on the back, I am gutted,
Yeah.
absolutely gutted.
Yeah, it's the life of a Scottish fan is sort of seeing your sort of best qualified players going and being elsewhere. I think it'll be announced. It'll be announced by now, especially by the time this podcast comes out. But I know that Ruben Logan will be representing Scotland. I think at under 20s level from now on. So look, there you go. You may have missed one Northampton Saints back rower out of the England under 20s ranks, but you've picked up another. So it's all silver linings, isn't it?
Thank goodness for that. And another one who actually, he's a real athlete as well. Played on the wing for Berkhamsted. He's played in the pack. He knows what he's about, but he's a firmly established back row man now from good stock as well.
Indeed, indeed.
Very good stock.
But yeah, I mean about Henry, we're just looking forward to it. I think he will be as well. He'll be one of those players who'll be almost more keen to get into training than he will be about sort of potentially running out at Twickenham or whatever. He'll just love the idea of playing rugby with the best players in the country all day. That's what drives.
Can you imagine someone who would throw themselves into more the idea of being able to go head to head all day, every day with Curry, with Earl, with Chesham, all these guys? I mean, for sure that they're going to be in the canteen at lunchtime, and they're all going to be going, "God, that kid."
Yeah.
I just wanted a quiet morning, and he's battered me.
I know he went on the again. I keep on shouting at other podcasts on this podcast. It's unbelievable. But the rugby pod, he went on it and spoke about his comings together, I'll call them, with Courtney Laws over the course of his first season with Northampton, and obviously Courtney's last season with Northampton. And I think basically, those small dogs that you'd usually get that sort of keep on biting at your ankles and you have to sort of kick them away. That is the metaphorical image I imagine that was the case of that season with Courtney Laws and Henry Pollock. He was basically just kept on making it quite physical in non-contact games, apparently, and Courtney Laws wasn't very happy with that. But look, I'd imagine that won't be kicked out of Henry Pollock anytime soon. He'll want to continue to be that little terrier and race after people and race after tennis balls and continue to fight and claw his way in. And it is inevitable that he'll wear an England shirt. We just didn't really expect it to be this early on.
No, and I think you're absolutely bang on. If there's a 6-2 split, he starts becoming a very, very attractive option to take that shirt. Particularly as with a 6-2 split with Chesham playing 6, potentially, you don't necessarily need a whole load of second rows to be involved in that 6-2 split. You can load it with back row. So there's plenty of opportunity to come for him. And actually, do you know what he reminds me of a little bit, just with those stories from the training field? It's Lewis Moody. They're the stories we had of Lewis Moody, who just didn't have an off button. Similar sort of thing. Obviously, he comes from a crop of under-20s that are the talk of the town at the moment. Asher Apoku Forjour as well is also in the squad from there. I mean, I suppose slightly different scenario for him in that Pollock don't get me wrong, Asher's been an absolute superstar for Sale Sharks, but in many ways he comes in as to help build for the future in that position, because the tight head position has been an area that's been a struggle for England in terms of depth in recent times. But who do you think are the sort of next cabs off the rank to come in? I mean, obviously, Afolabi Fasogban has been listed on the England squad list as unavailable for selection due to injury. So I think it can be seen as read that he's certainly on the radar of the England coaches. But is there anyone from that crop you're thinking, it's not going to be too long till he comes in?
Yeah, I think Pepe Tuipulotu, if he weren't selected, and I genuinely believe, look, I have no intel on this, so this is me completely guessing, that Mark Mapletoft would have had conversations with the England senior team saying, look, I've got a really good under-20 side here that I want to keep together. And if there's any possibility that you cannot call up my players to the senior squad, then that'd be appreciated, because I want to work with these players. And So I think Henry Pollock was a prime exception because look, he didn't have long left with under 20s anyway, and he was really going to be a big sort of talent regardless. But I think if Kepu wasn't already involved in that under 20 setup and obviously uncapped yet under 20s level, we want to see him at that sort of stage. Then potentially he would have been the one that would have replaced Jamie George in this Six Nations squad. I think he is the next cab off the rank after Curtis Langdon.
Hmm.
We spoke about this before, didn't we?
Yeah.
And just how sort of ready he is and how that hooker position is kind of set up for him. To give some potentially some other names, I think potentially the scrum half position is the other one that
Yeah.
could be a little bit wide open. I think like if I was to go off pure quality, I think someone like a Jack Bracken or a Charlie Griffin could be quite close, but England have wingers coming out of their ears.
Yeah.
So it's so difficult to kind of pin, and all young wingers as well. So it's so difficult to pin something down there. I think you look at obviously England had their two, probably their 9 and 21 for this Six Nations, literally go down injured within the same weekend. They've taken Alex Mitchell to Girona, so I think they're literally going to throw every bit of cotton wool at him to try and get
Yeah.
him ready for this Six Nations. But Archie McParland, obviously a fellow Saint, has been knocking on the door, as well as Lucas Friday. I think that they're kind of the future of that sort of Care Youngs conversation that we had for so long of who should wear that England shirt. And I think over the next 10, 12 years, we could be all, is it McParland or is it a McParland day or is it a Friday day that we sort of select, and it will depend on sort of opposition because they're two players that provide something completely different, but clearly at the under 20 setup have made a real impact.
Yeah, and if you look at that scrum half position, obviously Ben Spencer's never really quite had the opportunities. He's 32 now as well, so probably doesn't have long left where he's going to be getting call ups. Rafi Quirk, obviously, just injuries have been a nightmare for him, and he's kind of been in and out, and he probably needs to start getting to a sale ahead of Gus War before you can sort of start looking at him as a major option again. Harry Randall again is sort of his time has never come almost. So then you're looking at Mitchell and Van Portvliet, who obviously has had a bit of a while where he's not been involved just because of injuries and stuff, and they're probably the two at the moment. So there is space for a scrum half to come through, and when you look at McParland and Friday and the sort of experience they've got already, I mean Friday straight out of school has already been in Quinn's squads. McParland similarly last year was about 2 weeks out of school when he was playing for Saints. They've definitely had plenty of game time. I mean, the one that I think is definitely going to make an England appearance at some point, but probably isn't going to be next cab off the rank just because of the position he plays and the options they've got, is someone like an Ollie Davis,
Yeah.
who is a phenomenal player, will play for England, but at the moment, with Ford, Smith and Smith, you've got the experience, and then you've got two guys in their sort of mid-20s, early 20s who are going to have umpteen caps coming through. They're going to be difficult to dislodge, but getting that tutelage under Ford at Sale is going to be massive for him. Ford's obviously not got a huge amount of years left in the game. Marcus Smith, you'd imagine, maybe will do the next World Cup and will then probably go to France or somewhere for a payday.
Yeah.
Sure, I mean, maybe not, but it wouldn't be out with the realms of possibility. So you could see maybe come the next World Cup cycle, Ollie Davis and Finn Smith competing for that 10 shirt. You wouldn't put it past them. Anyway, all exciting stuff.
Do you think just quickly, because you've really got my cogs whirring as well? Do you think Ollie Davis could be that next Henry Slade of that player who will certainly do a job across 10, 12, 13, and for his first couple of years could happily sit in that 22 shirt and come on and be a ball playing centre or sort of steer the ship at 10? That could be an option.
He absolutely could. And actually, if now that I start thinking about it as well, I'm talking about the possibility of Marcus Smith going off to France. You've also got the possibility of Marcus Smith playing a fullback or being used as an auxiliary fullback. And then suddenly you go, well, actually, if you've got a guy who can play 10, 12, 13, you've got another guy who can play 10, 15, suddenly you've got all these options within a 23 that can make for something pretty exciting. So, yeah, I think you could be spot on. And actually, I've never really made this comparison before, but Ollie Davis and Henry Slade, very similar players. I don't know if it's just both
Yeah.
because they're both good-looking lads, but they're, they're very similar.
Yeah,
Very
they are.
similar.
They are, and I imagine they'll have the same sort of trajectories in that they. I can very much see Ollie Davis being the type of character that will stick at Sale for the majority of his career and be moved around that midfield and sort of having started at quite a lot at 10 and sort of be moved out to 13, 12, and then when Sale ultimately become really bad, like Exeter have had them moving back to 10, and like actually
Yeah,
we
exactly.
could have a complete parallel. We could have a complete parallel.
And as we know, Alex Sanderson doesn't have an issue with playing a 10 in the centres. Rob Dupree has got
Exactly.
about,
Rob
what,
He's
50,
got about
60, 70 appearances out there.
consistently as well. I think he
Has he got
maybe
the
last week
record or
got the
something?
record for the most consecutive appearances off Sam James. I think he got it off Sam James. So another, he just loves those kind of players. Sale love those kind of players that can play across the back line and available every week. And Ollie Davis would go, yeah, hand up, that's me. And look, yeah, I'm sure once the under 26 nations gets underway, it's going to sort of feed quite seamlessly, isn't it? Off the under 18s league into the under 26 nations, into the under 18 Six Nations. If you think that we're going to stop this podcast anytime soon, you're absolutely wrong because there is so much for us to talk about over the next
There
couple of
is
months.
far too much for us to talk about over the next couple of months. We won't know where to start. But actually, you bring us nicely into, I suppose, just the round off for this week's pod. I mean, next week we're going to get properly into it because it's the week that the under 26 nations start. So we'll properly preview things in that. But sort of just worth us hinting at a preview
Hmm.
to round things off today. Obviously, yeah, massive period in the youth game and the age grade game. The 26 nations, it looks like it's going to be competitive. Obviously, England coming off the back of the global title, but it's a different crop now. Players have been cycled through. It's a new and exciting group. Ireland have been so strong over the last decade probably.
Yeah.
Similar with France as well. With those back-to-back world titles a few years ago that have really been the backbone for the side that's gone on to be so brilliant at senior level. Italy have been so consistent, and then
Yeah.
Scotland and Wales struggling. I suppose maybe we'll just sort of start there. Do you see a possibility for some improvement from those two Celtic nations, Scotland and Wales? Scotland in particular, who really have been struggling at under 20s level.
Yeah, I think Scotland is actually slightly more tricky to call because you almost need your senior side to. It kind of happened with Italy. You need your senior side to hit rock bottom for them to start turning around and going, actually, okay, we need to start building from the ground up. And these Phoenix teams sort of come through under 18s and they sort of rise from the ashes and you start getting a good under 18 side and then a good under 20 side and then they drip into the senior side and you're like, okay, we're all good again. Scotland are almost doing it backwards.
Yeah.
By hook or by crook, however you want to perceive it, their ideal Six Nations senior side starting 15. I say ideal because I think half of them are now injured.
Oh, it's a
Um,
disaster. It's an absolute disaster.
um, aren't all necessarily players that have come through that under 20s setup. That's probably the most diplomatic way of putting it. So it kind of leapfrogs that kind of age grade systems. There's no necessity for it. So therefore, if you are the SRU, you're going, what is there a point in us really trying to invest and push on with this Scotland age grade setup? The answer, of course, is yes, because you should, because you absolutely should. You can't be relying on exiles for however long, because there's going to get points where they'll start turning you down, and they'll start playing for other nations, and maybe they don't want to move to Glasgow or Edinburgh, however lovely those places are. But
I
like,
don't know what you're talking about. They're beautiful places. Not the
um,
warmest, I'll give you that.
no, yeah, no, true. Um, but like, yeah, I think for Scotland it's a bit of a worry. I wonder what you think about Wales because they're again. they're almost in such a dire situation that quite a lot of their really good under 20s boys are getting senior call-ups. So so they're kind of looking at go, oh, actually that's really quite unfortunate. But like I'd imagine could someone like an Aidan Boshoff sort of or I mean previously it was Morgan Morse who kind of held that torch and was like, look, follow me. Are there going to be a couple more cabs off the rank that if they get three or four of those players that are looking really strong and really successful, could they look? I think they'll probably beat Scotland. Could they beat uh, a changing Ireland? Because this Ireland team is very much in transition, as is England, but on different kind of levels. So look, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on them. Look, you're a lot more closer to that Scottish contingent, and I wonder what you think about Wales as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do Scotland and then I'll do Wales. Although there is one area that I think both probably have a very similar, or should have a very similar viewpoint on, which is they don't necessarily need to win a lot of games or finish at the top end of the championship and all of these things, as much as those are the headlines. What they need to do is generate two or three players each year through the under 20s that are capable of playing international rugby in a couple of years' time. They don't need 15 of them. Be great if they could find them, but they don't need 15. They need two or three, maybe four guys each year to come through and be competing for an international shirt in 2 to 3 years' time. That's got to be the goal, because they don't have the depth of players to go, right, well, we'll turn out 15 that could be playing Premiership rugby. That's not going to happen, which is fine because they don't need it to happen. So I think both of them are in a similar position there, and probably, from the outside, we're always going to focus on outcome a little bit because it's the Six Nations. Of course, that's the nature of sport, is that there's a winner and a loser. So that's an interesting one for both of them. I think the other interesting thing for Scotland is they brought in David Nusifora, who was the performance director over in Ireland, that sort of overseen the transformation of Irish rugby in the last decade or so. He's come across to Scotland. He's going to have a big impact, not least because, from everything I understand, he's a sort of character that doesn't allow himself not to have a big impact. So he's going to be having a massive say. But also they've got John Fletcher up there who's helping with pathway stuff as well. Who obviously was such a big part of the England pathway for a good decade or so. So in terms of the foundations they've got up there, you'd think this is pretty promising. And I don't know the ins and outs of what the outlook will be, but if they can start turning around teams that can generate 2-3 players a year that are up to scratch, they're going to be in a good place for what is ultimately the goal, which is the top end of the game as they move on. So it'll be an interesting one to see how they go. I mean, the big thing I noticed in the last couple of years with Scotland in particular, Wales to an extent, is physically they just look different. They've not. There's a size issue there. I mean, you could look at it the other way and say, are we piling on too much size on players in England and in Ireland and in France too early? But I mean, the reality is there's a size gap there that is stark and noticeable. So that's going to be interesting. But I could get way too deep in on the ins and outs of the Scotland age grade stuff. Wales, I think, as you say, I think it's a really motivational time to be a Wales under 20 player, because you're probably going, if I perform well, I could get Wales call up.
Yeah.
I mean, almost round by round. You might get, if we play well in round one, if there's a couple of injuries in the senior side, I might get the call up if they're in my position by round two. I think it's an incredibly exciting time to be a Wales under 20 player. Is that necessarily healthy for the game of Wales? Perhaps not, but for individuals, you're going, God, I could be running out in front of 80,000 in 2 weeks' time with a couple of good performances. So I think that's massive for them. And then the rest of the tournament, I mean, we mentioned previously Italy. Have they hit the crest of the wave? It'll be interesting to see. I mean, the work their 20s have done in the last 5 years, give or take, has been incredible. And then Ireland, as you say, transition. England looking very strong, and France will be France. They've been sensational for a long time at that age group level. So it's an exciting tournament coming up, that is for sure.
It is, and yeah, as you say, we'll deep dive into it a lot more, lot better next week. But yeah, I think it's certainly up in the air. I love that we're almost getting two mini tournaments in one. We're getting that England, Ireland, France, battling it out, and then Scotland, Wales, Italy in terms of who's gonna sort of be the best of the rest. And that I could be proved wrong there. Could have a cat amongst the pigeons, but I think that as a little triad of
Yeah.
different tournaments to look out for is quite exciting.
And every year, for as long as I can remember in this under 26 nations, there is always a result that makes you go,
Yeah,
"Whoa, where did that come from?"
yeah,
So it'll be exciting to see where that comes. But as I say, we'll preview it all in great detail next week. And well, we've got what 6 rounds of action or 5 rounds of action rather to see who the next Henry Pollocks are from around the Six Nations. I dare say there's a few. We were.
yeah.
In fact, if I'm going to have a little deep dive on some of the squads in a bit and see if I can pick out some names that I think are going to make the jump soon, because there's going to be plenty around. If any hit the heights of Pollock as quickly as he has, it'll be quite something.
Indeed, yeah. I'm sure we'll both burrow away into the books and come out well informed for next week, so you can impress people in pub gardens, etc.
I do my best to.
Yeah,
Very very rarely are they impressed by me. They're normally bored stiff, but I do what I can.
yeah.
Right, that's it for this week. Will, you're playing this weekend. Where are you playing?
Yeah, I am. I'm playing away in Aylestone, which is Leicester. So it's an exciting journey for me. Yeah, it's one of my sort of rare weeks in which I'm not covering rugby, and I can play it instead. Oh, I've gone back to back, haven't I? So yeah, recovering from the previous week and trying to get going this week. But yeah, I'll be slightly unfortunate to be missing Seaford, but I've heard you've got a fairly good replacement potentially lined up.
I believe that maybe someone who's played at a mildly higher level than you, but
Do you think maybe yeah, European Champions Cups and stuff like that potentially? Or I don't know. I think I can't remember if I've played in any of those, but
well,
I'll have to look back and check.
you're right at the start of your career. The
Exactly.
the only way is up at this stage. I
Yeah.
suspect it's going to be a busy one for you though, because with that storm coming in, I suspect you're going to need to have your kicking boots on.
Oh God, yeah.
It's
I
gonna,
just chuck it to bigger blokes. I think that's the usual
yeah,
in that sort of weather.
yeah. Oh, if you can come through without any mud on the shirt, you've done well.
Brilliant. It's always
That's
the
got to
aim.
be the aim of the game.
Always the aim.
Right. Thanks everyone for joining us. Do tune in to the Seaford Tens, where you will get a nice surprise as to who is on commentary. It's an all-star lineup, but it's 10 o'clock over one and over two at Seaford College for the live stream, and it's going to be a big weekend. It's going to be a big week as well coming up. As I say, we're going to be previewing the under 26 nations next time out. Indeed, it will be round 4 of the under 18 Academy League as well. So there's going to be a fairly lengthy one. We may have to break it into 2 actually next week. There's going to be that much to talk about, given the way we natter on.
Yeah.
But thanks everyone for watching. Will, thanks so much for joining once again. And as I say, do please get in touch with your questions. We like hearing what you've got to say. We've enjoyed some of the comments on at NextGen15, at NextGenXV, and indeed on the NextGen15 Clubhouse, which I suspect is going to start getting quite busy, what with the under 26 nations coming up in the weeks to come. But thanks very much for joining us. We will catch you next time.